The C919 had just taken off when it was praised across China as the new symbol of independent aviation. But behind the spotlight, the C919 still relies almost entirely on American components. And just one export ban from Washington was enough to nearly erase the entire program. In the midst of the chaos, the U.S. suddenly released a statement that left China frozen, and the rest of the world could not believe what they just heard. What exactly was in that announcement that could suffocate the entire C919 project overnight? And does China truly have the strength to break the monopoly of American technology, or is the domestic aviation dream just an illusion fueled by nationalist pride? This video will answer it all. Before diving into the developments, let's look at what China is truly aiming for with this aircraft. Because the C919 is not merely a commercial airliner, it is a silent but sharp message that Beijing is ready to step into the exclusive territory of Boeing and Airbus. By December 2024, this aircraft had carried over 1 million passengers, a significant milestone for a newcomer in the global aviation landscape. On the very first day of 2025, the C919 completed its first international flight landing in Hong Kong. Next will be Southeast Asia, then Europe, where preparations for certification are already underway. Every move points to one clear goal: to escape technological dependence and build a fully independent civil aviation industry with China's own identity. The C919 is not just a plane. It is the strategic trump card that Beijing wants to put on the global table. But just as the dream began to lift off, a deadly blow from Washington suddenly struck, pushing the entire C919 program into crisis. On May 20, 2025, the U.S. government unexpectedly issued a ban prohibiting General Electric from supplying the LEAP-1C engine to COMAC, the only engine currently certified internationally and eligible for use on the C919. This is not a component that can be temporarily replaced. It is the heart of the entire system. Without the LEAP-1C, the entire aircraft becomes nothing more than an empty aluminum shell, unable to take off, unable to be delivered, unable to enter commercial service. It didn't stop there. The U.S. went further by halting exports from two other key suppliers, Honeywell and Collins Aerospace. These two companies provide critical systems for flight control, avionics, navigation, and safety, all of which China currently cannot replace with domestic technology. As a result, COMAC's entire production line immediately froze. No C919 could be completed. Over 1,000 orders from domestic airlines and international partners were instantly put at risk, facing cancellation or indefinite delay. The plan to increase production from 50 to 75 units per year and reaching 200 by 2029 was pushed to the edge of collapse. This wasn't just a technical setback, it was a strategic strike, aimed directly at the weakest point of the program, its dependence on Western technology. And with just one executive order signed from across the ocean, the entire technological pride that China had spent more than a decade building was suddenly facing total collapse. It seemed that every door had slammed shut for COMAC as the U.S. sanctions effectively paralyzed the entire C919 program. Yet, in a move that stunned the entire global aviation industry, Washington abruptly reversed its stance. The U.S. allowed General Electric to resume supplying the LEAP-1C engine for the C919. No apology, no clear explanation, just a silent decision, but one powerful enough to shake the foundation of China's entire aviation strategy. Why did the U.S. change course so quickly? The answer lies in two layers of interest: economic and geopolitical. First is the commercial reason. China is not only the second largest aviation market in the world, but also the fastest growing, with hundreds of millions of passengers, annually expanding domestic carriers, and the projected demand for thousands of new aircraft over the coming decades. This is a golden market that no corporation, not even GE, dares to abandon. But the true reason behind Washington's reversal lies deeper. Keeping the C919 alive in a state of dependency is a far more effective and long-term strategy than eliminating it outright. because if the C919 were completely shut down, China would have even more incentive to accelerate domestic technology development, create alternative engines, and seek every path to break free from Western influence. But if the C919 remains alive in a state of partial dependency, the U.S. does not need to control the entire plane. It only needs to hold one essential component, the LEAP-1C engine. From that moment on, the engine was no longer just a technical part. It became a political lever, a warning tool, a steel collar wrapped tightly around Beijing's technological ambition. Every C919 completed every flight that takes off every contract signed. All happens under one unspoken condition: as long as Washington keeps the switch on the C919 is allowed to exist. And that is the most terrifying kind of power, not to destroy, but to control life itself. A striking coincidence, the U.S. issued the relaxation decision just 3 days before the conclusion of a key trade negotiation round with China. This was not an act of goodwill. It was a carefully placed move to maximize pressure at the negotiation table. In the long-term game between two superpowers, Washington did not choose destruction. It chose manipulation. Placing the opponent in a position of reliance, of dependence, of waiting for permission, is how China's high-flying ambition is kept tethered to the ground. The C919 still flies, but every flight takes place under control, and the switch that allows it to lift off is not in Shanghai. It is in Washington. At this sensitive moment, the entire world is closely watching the C919, and the deeper people examine its structure, the more they encounter a suffocating paradox. This is an aircraft built by China, yet its core bears the unmistakable imprint of the United States. The LEAP-1C engine, currently the only certified option for the C919, was co-developed by General Electric of the US and Safran of France. Without the LEAP-1C, the C919 cannot take off, cannot be delivered, cannot enter commercial operation. Each newly assembled aircraft, without this engine, is merely a static piece of metal lying idle in the factory. More concerning, China still lacks any domestic alternative that meets international standards and can be deployed immediately. This means the fate of the entire C919 program, from the production line's expansion plans to contracts worth billions of dollars, is completely dependent on decisions from Washington. Ironically, within China, the C919 is still being widely promoted as a new symbol of self-reliance, a testament to the country's effort to escape Western dependence. Numerous television programs, press campaigns, and national-scale events have been organized to celebrate the C919 as a historic triumph of the domestic aviation industry. Headlines such as "The Pride Above China's Sky, C919, a historic leap in national aviation," or "We can now fly with our own wings," appear frequently across major state-run media. Yet, ironically, the most critical component determining the survival of the C919, its engine, is tied to one of America's oldest and most influential tech icons, General Electric. A paradox that is obvious to the entire world, except the place where it is most heavily praised. This puts the C919 in a position more dangerous than any technical flaw, becoming a hostage to global technology politics. Every flight hour, every operational plan, even its right to exist in the international aviation market, all depend on a single switch. And that switch is not in China's hands. Each time the C919 takes off, it is no longer just a commercial journey. It is a political test. Is Beijing still within the limits set by Washington? Will the U.S. continue to allow leeway or suddenly tighten the grip at any moment? Amid escalating tensions between the U.S. and China, the C919 is essentially flying through a zone of geopolitical turbulence. It may take off today, but no one can guarantee it won't be shut down from the other side of the world tomorrow. At a time when it seemed all doors had closed, a C919 was suddenly ordered to leave the assembly plant, not for display, not for internal testing, but to carry out a real civil flight. There was no ribbon-cutting ceremony, no international media, only a brief notice sent to a domestic airline along with a top-secret directive from high-level authorities: prepare for a capability demonstration flight. The aircraft took off from Shanghai on a gloomy spring morning. In the passenger cabin, there were no actual passengers, only disguised engineers carrying meters, monitoring charts, and vibration recording equipment. In the cockpit was a crew of veteran pilots who had flown Boeing aircraft for over 2 decades. No one said it, but everyone understood this was not just a flight. It was a silent declaration that China could fly on its own wings, or at least try to, even if some components from the West were still operating inside. For 3 hours, the C919 glided through low clouds, passing through areas of light weather turbulence, as if deliberately testing stability. All data was transmitted directly to the operations center in Beijing cockpit pressure engine temperature navigation system response when receiving satellite data. All monitored closely every millisecond. Not a single malfunction, not a single error warning, not a single abnormal sign. But strangely, when the aircraft landed in Guangzhou, no news was broadcast, no evening bulletin, no headline in major newspapers. The flight ended quietly, as if it had never happened. Because for Beijing, that flight was not meant for celebration. It was a trial under geopolitical pressure, a silent test before stepping into the global spotlight. If it failed, no one would know. But if it succeeded, those data lines would be used as political persuasion weapons, as proof that the C919 can operate in real-world conditions and is ready to break free from permanent control. Since that flight, domestic routes for the C919 have gradually expanded, quietly, cautiously, but steadily. A small network is forming like a real-world operations lab in China's skies. And right there, each takeoff carries not only passengers, but the greatest ambition of this nation to create an aircraft that can fly without needing a nod from Washington. And that is the most critical weakness in China's pursuit of internal technological autonomy. To end this dependence on the West and address the fatal flaw in the C919 program, China has been quietly pursuing a much bigger ambition, developing its own civil jet engine. At the center of this plan is the CJ1000A project, led directly by the Aero Engine Corporation of China AECC. From the moment the C919 was still on the drawing board, the CJ1000A had already been identified as the future engine, a fully Chinese-made version free from GE or any Western supplier. Initially, China aimed to put the CJ1000A into service by 2020. But the task of localizing everything, from fan blades, heat-resistant materials, and combustion chambers to control systems, caused repeated delays in the project. Developing a jet engine is not just a technical challenge, but a long-term race for reliability. No one can attach an unproven engine to a commercial aircraft and send hundreds of passengers into the sky. It takes tens of thousands of hours of testing, millions of kilometers in actual flight, and multiple safety certifications from domestic and international aviation authorities before an engine is approved for commercial use. After years of postponement and quiet development in early 2025, the CJ1000A officially entered its first testing phase, and according to AECC, the results exceeded initial expectations. The next goal is to complete the full testing cycle, obtain certification by 2027, and begin equipping domestic versions of the C919 by the end of this decade. If everything stays on schedule, and if the CJ1000A proves stable in commercial operations, this will mark a historic turning point. Not just for COMAC, but for the entire Chinese civil aviation industry. A passenger aircraft designed, manufactured, and operated entirely with homegrown technology will for the first time take to the skies. And when that day comes, the dream of breaking free from the West will no longer be a slogan. It will become reality. That will also be the moment when the critical power switch is transferred for the first time from Washington to Beijing. Even as China places high hopes on the domestically developed CJ1000A engine, the global reality is sounding a clear warning. Achieving engine autonomy in aviation is far from a smooth path. And the most recent and brutal example comes from Russia. Before the war in Ukraine erupted, Russia had a remarkably similar ambition to China to develop a new commercial aircraft named the MC-21, intended to compete directly with the Boeing 737 and Airbus A320. Initially, the MC-21 was equipped with the PW4-1400G engine from Pratt & Whitney, a U.S.-based company. Everything proceeded according to plan until Western sanctions were imposed following the conflict. As a result, the PW4-1400G was completely cut off. Russia was forced to switch to the PD-14, a domestic engine developed by United Engine Corporation. But this transition was not simply a matter of removing one and inserting another. The entire process of system integration, safety certification, weight balancing, and flight validation had to start all over again, causing the MC-21 program to fall behind by years. As of 2024, production numbers remain extremely limited, and the aircraft has yet to gain a foothold in the international market. The lesson from Russia stands as a serious warning for China. Even with a domestic engine in hand, the road to real-world deployment is long and filled with uncertainty. Developing an engine is one challenge, but putting it into reliable, sustainable commercial use with full international certification is another. More critically, if the United States tightens restrictions again, not just on engines, but on electronic sensors and integrated software, the entire CJ1000A development process could face similar setbacks to what PD-14 experienced. But what if China actually succeeds? Would the global aviation industry witness the rise of another major player standing alongside Boeing and Airbus? If the CJ1000A can operate reliably, obtain full international certification, and if the C919 becomes fully independent from Western technological control, then the structure of the global civil aviation market will shift in an unprecedented way. For over half a century, the skies of commercial aviation have been dominated by two names, Boeing and Airbus. Not because others didn't try to enter, but because aviation is one of the most technically, legally, and financially challenging sectors in the world. Thousands of tests, millions of flight hours, billions of dollars in investment, and decades to build trust. That's the threshold every challenger must cross. But if COMAC truly clears all those barriers, a new Big Three could be established. And that wouldn't just be a hypothetical anymore. This scenario is entirely possible. China holds a massive domestic market, large-scale manufacturing capabilities, and an industrial strategy willing to burn through resources in pursuit of long-term goals. Once the CJ1000A is complete and certified by organizations like ESA or the FAA, the C919 will have a path into larger, more demanding markets, not only in Asia, but also in South America, Africa, and Eastern Europe. At that point, the question is no longer, can the C919 fly, but is the world ready to accept a 100% Chinese-built aircraft? For countries that are friendly or fall within Beijing's sphere of influence, the answer might well be yes, especially when paired with soft financing, technical support, or diplomatic incentives. But for Western nations, Japan, South Korea, or India, where strategic trust, safety standards, and regulatory credibility are paramount, introducing Chinese aircraft into commercial fleets could ignite serious debate. But history has proven one thing: no monopoly lasts forever. If that day truly comes, when the C919 takes off powered by a Chinese-developed engine, internationally certified and ready to go head-to-head with Boeing and Airbus, the skies will no longer be a two-player arena. That will mark the official beginning of the Big Three battle, and the question then won't be whether COMAC can join the game, but who among the three will be pushed out of it. From a symbol of ambition to break free from the West, the C919 has evolved into a living embodiment of the struggle between technology, global power, and influence. China wants this aircraft to serve as a declaration that they can break the duopoly of Boeing and Airbus and build a civil aviation industry under their own control. But the harsh reality remains: the heart of the C919, the LEAP 1C engine, is still held by the U.S. And a single sanction from Washington could freeze the entire program and suspend thousands of pending orders. The United States knows this well. And instead of shutting it down entirely, they chose a more strategic route, let the C919 fly, but under dependency. Each takeoff is not just a flight, but an act under surveillance judgment and control. That critical switch does not sit in Shanghai. It still resides in Washington. Meanwhile, China is not standing still. They are accelerating localization fast-tracking the CJ1000A project, expanding into friendly markets and turning the domestic stage into a live performance of operational capacity. Russia's experience shows this road is filled with obstacles. But if China succeeds, it would represent a geopolitical shift of historic proportions. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our upcoming analyses. What do you think about the future of the C919 and the global aviation balance? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching. And remember, what we've shared here is an analytical perspective from multiple sources. For a more comprehensive and objective understanding, we encourage you to explore additional references.